Do your consumer marketing efforts feel complicated? Experian Automotive delivers data-driven marketing solutions to find new customers and keep loyal ones. Drive measurable results with trusted data and expert support. Learn more at Experian.com/automotive.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the third week in June 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. We're breaking down some of the biggest stories in the auto industry from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. Today on the show, Automotive News is releasing our list of top auto suppliers in 2025. Our own John Irwin joins the show to talk about this year's list and what those companies face as trade tensions stir and market conditions evolve.
There are a lot of fundamental changes going on, and I think we're seeing that kind of specifically as it relates to software and this push for software-defined vehicles.
That's coming up in a few minutes, but first, Jamie, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, Kel.
All right, well, let's get into some news, sir. It's been a rough week for Ford. First, the company's rare earth magnet supply is day to day. We also reported this week that Ford is recalling over 300,000 Mach-E's. First, how might Ford's supply issues affect future vehicle production plans? And does this recall just add to the list of Ford's ongoing quality issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough road, like you said. You know, Ford is the only U.S. automaker that's lost production so far that we know of to lack of rare earth magnets. And as Jim Farley said, they're really, day to day, hand to mouth, almost a sort of chip crisis level, chip shortage crisis situation. And then the recalls on top of it. Farley has been battling these quality problems since even before he became CEO. A lot of turnover in the leadership, a lot of, some of these lingering problems that have come out, but some of these include, new models that are still rolling off the line with problems. Now, I mean, I would say some of these recalls, this latest one in particular, seems sort of like an abundance of caution kind of recall. They're not killing people, but it's still a quality issue. It adds cost and it hurts the view of the brand by consumers.
Also, Tesla dominates this year's American-Made Index. What are some key factors behind Tesla's success, and is a major part of that supply chain localization?
Yeah, it totally is. They've got the two plants in the U.S. They do have also one in Germany, one in China. Those are really for local markets. So, they don't have any plants in Canada, nothing in Mexico, and they make their batteries, here in the U.S. too. So, relatively little exposure, probably some on the raw materials and mineral fronts and a few supplies, but a lot more domestically based. But, we've also seen, Tesla's had to raise prices, presumably because of tariffs, and they've been losing market share. Their sales are down even as the market is up. Maybe that's somewhat related to production schedules and, mixed decisions, but it's not clear that winning the American-Made Index, while that is a good sign for avoiding tariffs, is really a winning formula for winning in the market.
And Jamie, you're like my personal automotive genie, right?
I try.
Yeah, so see, I'm going to need you to make this make sense for me. Mitsubishi says it's hiking prices on U.S. vehicles. How does Mitsubishi plan to balance new investments with rising costs for consumers?
Yeah, I don't know. Raising prices by 2% for a brand that's facing 25% tariffs on everything it sells, I'm not sure there's a lot of plans for future investment. That's not a good way to build the profits and keep them going. Look, like we talked about earlier in the week, Mitsubishi is 100% import dependent. They don't make any vehicles in the U.S. Maybe eventually they can get Nissan to make a few for them, but they're really under pressure and they're just trying to keep their dealers competitive, but they can't do it at the cost of the bottom line, at least not for too long. We're seeing a lot of Japanese brands, I think, try to absorb some of the pain for now in the hopes that the government can negotiate a lower tariff on autos as well as other things. But we also saw that study from Alex Partners projecting that automakers would pass on, 80% of the tariff costs. That's not happening yet. And so something's got to give at some point. And it's either going to be higher prices that turn away customers, or lower profits that lead to less investment.
And finally, Jamie, some sad news. Automotive News has lost a longtime family member, senior editor Lindsay Chappell. You were very close to Lindsay. Can you let the listeners know his impact on automotive journalism and just being a great father, husband, and friend?
Yeah, Lindsay was our longtime reporter and editor in Nashville. He died this past week, long been struggling with cancer. Lindsay was an expert on the transplants, the manufacturing operations of foreign-owned automakers. That really, started in the 80s and has just grown since then. When I became an auto reporter back in 1997, he was already an institution, the absolute leader in the coverage of that part of the industry. When he retired last year, we talked here on the show about what a privilege it is to cover the auto industry. Lindsay was skeptical, like journalists are, but he was always open to learning, what people in the industry were doing to try to keep things moving forward. And he loved telling stories, professionally and just for fun.
There was this feeling that the corporations of Japan had bloodlust, that they wanted to come take the wealth of the United States and take over the American industrial base. There's paranoia that Japan was this unstoppable force, this fiendish foe in automaking, and they were going to be all over the United States. And I made sure that didn't happen. So that was the idea.
Lindsay cut his career a little short to focus on fighting cancer full time and saving his strength for his family. In particular, he wanted to make sure he could be there to walk his daughter down the aisle, which he did. Lindsay Chappell was with Automotive News for 36 years, retiring last year. He was 67.
Coming up, a look at Automotive News' list of top suppliers in 2025. That's next on Weekend Drive.
Daily Drive listeners like you have access to the lowest price for Automotive News Congress 2025 on September 11th.
The event is where the industry's biggest players tackle its toughest challenges. Congress attendees don't just follow the industry, they lead it.
This year's featured speakers include Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Yusin Chung and General Motors CEO Mary Barra.
We are investing in America. We're creating jobs. That's creating IP in this country. And I think, the United States needs to lead in key technologies.
Join us to gain the insights and connections needed to steer your business through massive change.
To get the lowest price for the event, go to autonews.com/events, select Auto News Congress, and type in the discount code Daily Drive, one word, all caps. We'll see you in September in Detroit.
Are you an automotive marketer navigating today's rapidly evolving landscape? Finding new customers and nurturing existing relationships can feel like a complex journey. But what if you had a powerful engine fueled by trusted data to guide your way? That's where Experian Automotive comes in. We understand the challenges you face. Today's personalized consumer journeys demand intelligent planning and precise execution. That's why we offer the Experian Marketing Engine, a coordinated suite of data-driven solutions designed to help you develop, execute, and most importantly, measure effective marketing campaigns. At the heart of our solutions is Experian's trusted data and a dedicated automotive team committed to your success. We empower you to drive measurable results with unique data insights, including identity solutions to help you better connect with your ideal customers with greater accuracy by cleaning and enriching your first-party data. Consumer and market insights helps you gain a deeper understanding of market trends and consumer behavior, enabling you to better target consumers. Targeted audiences to help you pinpoint and target the right prospects at the right time with the right message. Better data truly connects you to better results. Stop guessing and start driving measurable impact with Experian Automotive. Ready to transform your automotive marketing? Visit Experian.com/automotive to learn how our data-driven solutions can help you find new customers, keep loyal ones, and navigate the road ahead with confidence. That's Experian.com/automotive. Take control of your marketing journey today.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. It's been a tough time to be an automotive supplier. That was true before President Trump's trade war that has led to increased costs and supply shortages from China. Now it's only getting tougher. With that as a backdrop, we at Automotive News are getting set to release our 2025 list of the top auto suppliers. Here to talk about this year's list is our own John Irwin, coming to us from his home office in Ann Arbor. John Irwin, welcome back to Weekend Drive.
Thanks for having me back.
The Automotive News list of the top 100 suppliers in North America, Europe, and the world is coming out at a time when there's a lot of distress in the parts sector. Obviously, tariffs are really challenging the automotive value chain. Are suppliers still pretty paralyzed by the lack of clarity in the trade environment?
Yeah, generally speaking, that's fair to say. Suppliers really, since the start of the year, have just sort of been feeling a little bit stuck. They don't have clarity in the long term. Looking at what the trade environment might look like, at the end of the year, let alone a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. Obviously, there are a lot of ongoing trade negotiations and things that could be shifting at any given moment. They're hoping to get more clarity, obviously, as a lot of these deals might be worked out with individual countries, specifically, obviously, the major trading partners like the EU, Japan, Korea, that supply a lot of parts and vehicles into the U.S. But yeah, as of right now, it's kind of a big waiting game. And on top of that, we're seeing a lot of suppliers that are just sort of stuck not only on tariffs, but into their automakers and their plans long term. Are they shifting their production schedules? Are they rethinking where and how they build? In a lot of cases, they're waiting on their customers to provide more clarity, and they're dealing with the same issues.
You're exactly right. The automakers are facing it too. The country by country tariffs, so-called reciprocal tariffs, but also the steel and aluminum tariffs, the auto tariffs that President Trump suggested might be increased to 50% instead of 25%. So, the automakers have to make their decisions and the suppliers have to respond. So they're both kind of stuck there. I mean, one of the things along those lines, we've been talking about it for, I think, feels like a year or more now, this idea of stranded capital, suppliers investing in the EV transition, only to be left holding the bag with facilities that aren't being used as much as planned when the automakers then change their mind about what EVs they're bringing to market and when.
Yeah, that's something that's really, it's compounding a lot of the stresses that suppliers are feeling right now. That idea that, a couple of years ago, in the past, toward the beginning of the decade, suppliers were spending a lot of money investing, like you said, into, new facilities, whether, it's a greenfield investment, whether that's refurbishing an older factory to make parts for EVs instead of for gas-powered vehicles. And they were banking on volumes being where they're at a certain level to get a return on investment. And now, obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, a lot of EV programs have been scaled back. Maybe they've been delayed. Maybe they've been canceled outright. And like you said, suppliers are just sort of left holding the bag at that point. I know that's been a big topic of discussion really over the past couple of years. Suppliers are bringing that up with their customers, especially as they negotiate, new contracts moving forward. They're looking to get some sort of guarantees that, okay, if volumes fall short, we can be compensated for that. It depends on the product, depends on the relationship between the companies, whether that's actually working out or not. But that's something a lot of them are pushing for moving forward, whether it's a gas-powered vehicle they're supplying for, battery electric, hybrid. They want that guarantee that, if we're going to make some massive investment to supply for you guys, we want to make sure that we're not going to just be stuck holding the bag at the end like we have been the past couple of years.
Turning back to the lists, right? The biggest suppliers in recent years have been the big European, especially German companies, and they've faced some extra challenges in the market, it seems.
Yeah, the past couple of years have been, especially over the past year or so, it's been kind of rough for a lot of the major German suppliers. We've seen, news in Europe of, lots of layoffs and that sort of thing. And again, kind of talking about electrification, the EV investments maybe not paying off to the degree that they wanted, on top of labor issues, on top of inflation and energy costs and that sort of thing, specifically in Europe. So for a lot of these companies, there's still all the major suppliers that you'd expect out of Europe are still ranking very highly on this list. But if you compare year over year, a lot of them did see pretty significant revenue declines, and that was kind of to be expected given all the news that we've seen out of Europe and out of Germany over the past year or two. And yeah, moving forward, they're kind of dealing with the same issues everyone else is at this point as it relates to trying to get long-term clarity. They're hoping that some of the cuts that they made are going to make them a little more nimble. These are huge legacy companies that have been around for a long time. Maybe they're hoping to become a bit more nimble as things are pretty touch and go. Might change pretty quickly when it comes to trade, EV policy, and that sort of thing. So they're hoping that maybe they're going to weather this storm and then emerge out a little bit more quicker to adapt to these sort of things. But yeah, it's been interesting to say the least for them over the past year or two. They've had to make some pretty significant cuts, and that's definitely reflected in this year's list.
Yeah, a lot of job cuts have been alluded to or planned by those companies, and then some restructurings. We know there will be at least one big change to the list next year when Continental splits its auto supply business off from its tire business. That's going to change the shape of that. Another big change, though, in the industry, we're seeing the emergence of software-defined vehicles, or at least, the efforts to get to something we would call a software-defined vehicle. It's brought in some big new players into the industry, but also some new challenges in, relationships between suppliers and automakers.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of automakers sort of bring software in-house as they, see software as the thing that's going to really differentiate themselves moving forward. As that happens, a lot of them are investing internally, maybe not relying on suppliers as much as they would have in the past, for certain types of software. And of course, that fundamentally changes the nature of the relationship between automaker and supplier. Obviously, that provides an opportunity for a lot of them to maybe rethink, what they provide specifically to automakers. If they were used to supplying software in the past, okay, what can we do instead? Is there something that we can invest in that would set us up well for the future? I mean, it's interesting to say the least, kind of the evolving nature of, it seems like there's always a swing between automakers, bringing things in house, and then maybe a little, several years pass and they decide they want to, instead outsource and get, have their suppliers supply things to them. It seems like, at least when it comes to software, we're on that swing back toward software being, automakers bringing things in house. So it'll be really interesting to see in the next year or two kind of how the list evolves. Are companies that maybe were reliant on software, do they move up on the list, down on the list as automakers look to do their own thing? Yeah, it's an interesting time, and the relationship between automakers and suppliers at the moment, it's there are a lot of fundamental changes going on, and I think we're seeing that kind of specifically as it relates to software and this push for software-defined vehicles.
Our colleague Molly Boygan has a whole story on that. Everyone should check that out when it's available. Before I let you go, though, John, I want to ask about another story that you wrote recently about Marelli. It's one of the world's biggest suppliers at $13 billion in annual revenue. It filed for bankruptcy protection this month. How much is it a unique case, and how much is it a harbinger of more trouble for parts companies?
Yeah, Marelli, in many cases, it was formed in 2019. Basically, from the start, was just saddled with debt, and it's been struggling with that ever since. And on top of that, it's been dealing with, over the past couple of years, the struggle. It's a major supplier for Stellantis and Nissan. As Stellantis and Nissan have had their own troubles, they've been affected by that. So in many cases, Marelli's bankruptcy, is kind of unique to it. But at the same time, it is not the only supplier with very high debt levels, or again, kind of getting back to what we were talking about, a lot of suppliers just find themselves, after spending a lot of money on investments and everything else, they're not getting the revenue that they were looking for out of EVs. So they're not able to service that debt maybe to the level that they were expecting. So the fact that, Marelli, is going bankrupt in part because of, the debt levels that it saw, it probably won't be the last, according to many analysts that I've been talking to. Tariffs and the inability to know, 6 months from now, a year from now, what the trade environment will look like, and thus what the new vehicle market will look like, and what programs that you're supplying for automakers, what sort of volumes you'll get from that. The lack of visibility makes it really difficult for these highly leveraged companies to plan. And, that was something that Marelli in its bankruptcy filings, it pinned, tariffs, not necessarily for the bankruptcy, but kind of accelerating its slide into bankruptcy. And Given, like I said, they're not the only supplier to find themselves with a lot of debt. A lot of analysts expect Marelli's not going to be the only one, but we'll see.
Yeah, we know from experience that when companies fail, they blame everything they can that's outside the company, and tariffs, are pretty new to the game. This latest round of tariffs, but like you said, they're under duress, and so are a lot of maybe suppliers that aren't going to be on the top 100 list, but down second, third, fourth tier suppliers that have been through a lot of challenges in this last half decade, reduced volumes from COVID and then the chip shortage. They've faced these challenges on, making investments that maybe didn't pan out. And a lot of them just don't have a lot of financial cushion. And there's some risk that they could file bankruptcies or need preemptive bailouts from their customers. So it could be a lot more strain on the system in the coming year or two.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know that's something that a lot of suppliers have been keeping an eye on, those tier one suppliers. They're trying to get as much visibility as they can into tier 2, 3, and 4. It's easier said than done, especially, the deeper you go into the supply chain. But, that's something that a lot of them are keeping an eye on. I know MEMA, the supplier trade group, they have been surveying members about kind of how they feel about their supply bases. And the number of companies that are on these watch lists that suppliers have, that they're worried about the financial health of some of their suppliers, that number has risen pretty significantly over the past few months. And I think that kind of reflects a lot of what you were talking about, where these smaller suppliers have already been, pretty strained. And any little thing, whether that's, a shift in trade policy, EV programs not panning out, whatever it is, just one little move, maybe that didn't go in the direction that they wanted, that might be the thing that kind of pushes them over. So that's something that I know a lot of suppliers are keeping an eye on. They're trying to work with their automakers too, to make sure that these companies are, if they need to bail them out, they can. If they need to work with them to make sure that they, get payments sooner, that's something that a lot of them are working on. But it's a lot for them to manage at the moment.
John Irwin covers auto suppliers and tariffs and trade for us here at Automotive News. John, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jamie.
That's all for this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on supply chains, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back on Monday for a conversation with Stellantis chairman John Elkann.
We are getting in a world which is shifting our industry from being a global industry to being a multi-regional industry.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. If you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.